Um, Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Anti-Tech Cast. I'm Ryan.
And I'm Griffin.
And with us today is West Northwest, an anti-tech philosopher. And I'd like to begin today.
How are you doing today, West?
Start with that.
I'm doing great. How are you all doing?
We're doing good. We're doing good.
We're doing well. We're talking to you today a lot because you sent a paper to us entitled "The Conservation of Man and Wild Nature in Light of 21st Century Post-Industrial Technologies." A little bit of a mouthful, but we really enjoyed the paper, and we wanted to talk with you a little bit about it.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
So to begin, just for the general audience, because they haven't, we've read your paper, but they haven't. And your title, it gives a good insight into what the paper is going to be about. But my question for you, the first question is, what is the main idea that you want people to grasp in this paper once it's out there?
Well, yeah. What's like the thesis?
Well, I would say the first thing that's very important is to realize that for those of us who want to save wild nature, we can't save wild nature without saving man, because man is the one who created industrial technologies. And so if you want to get nature out of the clutches of humanity, you have to get humanity out of the clutches of technology. That's a very important thing to remember, especially the second thing. That leads right into the second thing, which is that the industrial technology today is controlled by 21st century algorithmic technology that has followed on in the information revolution. And that humanity is now coming under control of that technology. And that technology directly controls the industrial technology. So what I'm really trying to say here is that humanity and nature are in this together. Mm-hmm. One cannot save wild nature by turning against humanity. We have to redeem humanity. We have to improve ourselves. We cannot extinguish ourselves and expect these new technologies without us will destroy nature much faster. And furthermore, we have to be for ourselves. There is no self-respect if we are not for ourselves.
Yeah, totally. I think that's great because it speaks to like something that we notice a lot in kind of pop culture and even among like some anarchists nowadays, is that like a lot of people identify human beings as the problem, that we're the like faulty in some intrinsic way, and that we're causing all of this destruction. And so but if you focus on humanity as the issue, then that's not going to get us any closer to a solution. You point out, that the issue now is not so much like these industrial technologies that a lot of neo-Luddites kind of talk about, that it's upgraded in the 21st century. How does the problems that we're facing now in the 21st century differ from those that were addressed by like Kaczynski back in the day, or things that we're looking at in the 90s?
Right. Well, I think it is the same issue posed by Ted Kaczynski. However, it has to be updated to the 21st century. Right. In other words, he wrote in the 20th century. So a whole other layer has occurred since he wrote, and we have to adapt and update his whole thing to accommodate what's going on in the 21st century. It's the same idea. So first of all, I'd like to say that the people who think they're just defending wild nature without understanding that humanity came from nature and that the two things go together, humanity and nature, if one is a self-hating human, then one is just trying to save nature, then one is engaged in a surrogate activity. Mm-hmm. Because it's based on our power process, it's based on our furthering ourselves and improving ourselves and developing ourselves. It is not about hating ourselves. That Ted said that self-hatred is a leftist trait. Yeah. So we have to understand that we are all in this together. That's number one. Number two, the difference between what Ted was writing about in the 20th century and what we have now is that the industrial technology, basically, this was man, basically using industrial technology to conquer nature. Mm-hmm. And so you had all of nature being used as a standing reserve. This is what Heidegger would call it, standing reserve for our use. When you take a tree and turn it into lumber, it is no longer a tree. It is these blocks of lumber, right?
Right.
Okay, so what's happening now is that the new technology, the algorithmic technology, which is even fewer people at the helm of it, is now turning man himself into standing reserve.
We are the resources now. We are the natural resources. Yeah.
We are the new natural resource and I oh yeah, the people who programmed it. No, it's the whole system. The system, you know, whether you're talking about Ted or whether you're talking about Mumford or whether you're talking about Elul, the system is a combination of humans and artifacts, basically, and machines. Mm-hmm. It's like a self-propelling, you know, thing that self-evolves and runs by itself, but it feeds on some energy. So it was feeding and building itself on natural energy, and now it's doing it on human natural energy. Mm-hmm. And that the human equivalent of when the tree becomes lumber, the human becomes data.
Right.
And this 21st century system feeds on data. So I call that the human data reserve, which is the human version of standing reserve.
Okay, yeah. It's interesting because like we talk about humans being transferred into data like that, and it seems like this isn't really a secret. It seems like a lot of people are kind of aware of the fact that they are just data for the system, especially about when all these things about Facebook and Google come to light and how they're using people's data and to make money. And like, you know, you have this free service, quote unquote, on your phone, but you're really paying for it in this way. They're just turning you into data that can be used and sold. But it's interesting that how like they don't have to hide it, and it's still so effective. Yeah.
There's a lot of self-hating humans, right? Yeah. Humans who have demeaned themselves, who don't believe they deserve any better, who exist to serve the system, who have been sort of almost trained to be servo mechanisms to the system, and they think that's all they deserve. And what this thing does is it eats their mind. Yeah. It asks and turns it into data, and their mind, because they are outsourcing their human functions, to machines, these algorithms, mm-hmm. they actually lose the capabilities that they were born with in nature. Yeah. Their minds start to be emptied out of their natural capabilities.
Right.
And that would be, if whoever depends too much on a GPS device loses his ability to navigate space.
Yeah, and it's so like in a similar way, it seems that like, you know, the more we communicate with each other through these digital technologies, the more like the less we're able to communicate in a person-to-person situation. We're like ridding ourselves of our social ability.
Yes, and that's why you have a whole generation, you know, obviously not everybody, but many who are awkward socially, who are scared to speak people. They're just terrified of unscripted conversation with their fellow humans, and they end up having to take college courses on conversation.
Yeah.
So they're losing the thing that kept humans alive. Even animals have social capabilities, but everything that is outsourced is everything that is lost. It is not a service. It is masquerading as a service. It is an extraction, parasitical type of thing, not a service.
Yeah, it's not making anything easier. It's just making them worse. Yeah.
I mean, it's easy to just sit in a cell, a virtual cell and do nothing. You know, mm-hmm. It would be easy if nobody ever did anything, right? It'd be easier just to lie down and die, or just do nothing and just be a sloth and just just let everything happen past you. Yeah. So, you know, it's like you can, you know what I mean? That at some point, ease is the wrong type of goal to have.
Exactly. Yeah.
Ease is not, it's whatever strengthens us, whatever makes us, you know, basically stronger, to improve ourselves, to develop ourselves within the constraints of nature. We develop together with nature, and we do not allow anything to regress us. Mm-hmm. That ease thing is just somebody who doesn't want to exist, really, in my opinion. It doesn't want to exist and exert themselves for natural reward.
Yeah. They've embraced some kind of horrible kind of nihilism, and it's taken over their worldview. Yeah,
exactly.
So, West, I have a question for you about something that you referenced specifically in your piece. And I'll just read you the short part of the quote, because you're talking about the relation between the modern computerized system and humanity and nature, right? And so you're talking about how The network system in humanity in which both parts are becoming unequal yet intact contribute to some greater unified whole, but rather of the evolutionary outcompetition of human and natural life by networks of 21st century artificial systems in accordance with universal Darwinism. And my question is, so that's a new term for me. I've never heard the phrase universal Darwinism, and you don't exactly expound on it in the piece. So I was wondering, what exactly is that?
Yeah, it didn't come from me. It came from the tech community. Basically, it's the same Darwinism that we talk about, the competition of species.
Yeah.
Okay, so take that and expand it to anything that has dynamism. Anything. So a system can outcompete a human. Mm-hmm. So we're not, in other words, we're taking a universal Darwinism would even apply to other life in space. In other words, it would apply to anything that evolves, and it's not just, ideas evolve, right? So you could apply it to ideas. You could apply it to computers. You could apply it to anything. And so that's the point, is that original Darwinism was simply about biological life. Universal Darwinism takes that and applies it to anything. So, for example, the early tech theorist Steve Almohandra talked about how this technology, he was deeply involved in it, would flow downhill. It would take the shortest path, right, to flow downhill to conserve energy. I'll say that it will flow downhill and it will go right through human flesh and right through nature, right. And it will outcompete as it does so, because if survival is based on efficiency, let's say efficiency for the hunt, okay? So the lion that hunts more efficiently because he has more capabilities than another animal is going to outcompete that other animal and maybe use him as prey. So the problem is if this technology is the lion and we're the prey, we will be outcompeted by this technology because it is more efficient. It wants to, it doesn't want anything. I don't want to anthropomorphize it, but it will, if we feed this energy into it, it will continue to expand like a cancer. It will not only colonize human minds, but eventually it will colonize physical space. Think about how humans have basically driven wild species into very tight contained areas, like, gorillas in Africa, for example, carved through their habitat and confine them into little islands. Right. Well, that's kind of going to happen to us, because when you start basically keeping somebody is not really doing a lot outside, COVID is simply a warning about what that could be like. Mm-hmm. Everybody is in their little block house, and they surrender. They don't go shopping anymore. They don't do it. Even the modern world stuff they don't do anymore. They don't go outside. They don't use the parks. They don't go and interact with other people in person, right? Yeah. So eventually you've got people essentially confined to these virtual human zoos. You got your little virtual cell, which would, the square on Zoom might be a good metaphor, but I actually prefer the Facebook avatar myself. You're confined in this virtual prison cell, and everything else will be taken. This system will take all the ground that we give up. Mm. And we will be outcompeted because we have surrendered our minds. Our minds are our strength. Our minds are minds that have self-awareness and have, in other words, if you give up your power and your power process, and you give all your ground away, what are you doing here? Eventually those machines will be able to produce their own data resource. They won't need us for that. Yeah. And it'll just keep expanding like a bacteria, or a fungus. Yeah,
it's funny. I think a lot about this quote. I think it was Herbie Hancock, maybe, there was like a brief little interview where they were talking about the technology they were using to make their music. And at the time, they were like, oh, it's just a tool, and this is what a lot of people still think, that, humans are the issue. If there's any problem going on with technology, it's about the person that's using it, not the tech itself. And at the end of the quote, he goes like, why do people blame technology? Like, humans are the ones that have to turn it on. They can't program themselves yet. And then they laugh about it. And it's like, That's where we're at right now. It's programming itself literally. We hear about like there's video games that they make where they just send like virtual drones into a digital space and it creates a world, and you ask the game makers like, hey, what's going on in this game? They're like, we have no idea. Like we have to explore it to figure out what's going on. So it's like and you know, that's just an analogy for what's happening everywhere, that we're just letting it take over. And you mentioned Cove. That's something we've talked about a little bit, that it's definitely like a window into what we're getting towards. And I see people post things now, post like quote unquote post pandemic, if you think that we're out of it, but that, you know, they talk about how their lives really didn't change when the pandemic started, and it's still the same now after the pandemic, and they're just happy to be sitting inside in their little digital prisons, you know, getting all the dopamine boosts they could ask for.
And you know, and if we give up our right to inhabit physical space, we will lose it. Mm-hmm. That something more dynamic that is feeding on our energy, that is parasiting off of us, will occupy that space someday. I mean, what if every space around you ended up, you know, 50 years from now being you see all these robot factories go up where our place, you know, human spaces used to be. Yeah. So the same way that we saw human spaces take over where natural spaces used to be, we're going to see machine spaces taking over where human spaces. If we abandon them to a dynamic force under universal Darwinism, we will be crowded out, outcompeted. Our human habitats will become increasingly hostile as they are taken over by non-human entity, you know, elements. Mm-hmm. And we will simply be outcompeted. And look at, you know, if people are not out in person, they're not going to reproduce. I mean, we already have that problem. They're not going to reproduce. They're not going to, you know, I mean, even, I'm not talking about in overpopulated spaces, but I mean, even at replacement levels, they're not going to reproduce. Yeah. Meaning our natural functions are not going to be, people are going to, basically get rid of all their natural functions and do only service to the machine. Yeah, we're being atrophied in a weird way. Yeah. That's right. Yeah. That's exactly. Atrophy is a good word for it. When you surrender your power process, you are a slave. Mm-hmm.
So West, I have a follow, because you mentioned this concept of a human zoo, like the digital zoo, or even so in with the pandemic, it was both the physical zoo, like we were confined to the home, but also a digital zoo. And in your paper, you quoted Elon Musk, and he acknowledged this as a possible outcome, saying, so, you know, that's one of the possible outcomes for us. So my question's a little strange, because we're clearly on one side of the issue, right? Like we're like, this is a bad thing. Like the eventual outcome is that we're going to be put in human zoos. So my question is, for people that are positive with technology, like Elon Musk, what do you think? Like, so they think that there's some positive outcome to all this, right? What do you think? What do you think they think that positive outcome is?
I would not characterize it. I think some of them, I'll separate it. Let me start with Elon Musk. Mm-hmm. I don't believe that Elon Musk has a positive outcome. I believe that Elon Musk, he spent a lot of time trying to basically stand up and jump up and down and tell people that AI is gonna basically destroy us if we don't get it under control. Right. Nobody wanted to listen, not even to him. Even as powerful a system player as he is, others did not want to listen to him. Mm-hmm. So what he's saying is, okay, they didn't listen to me. So now the only other option to survive humanity is to merge it with the machine. Mm-hmm. And of course that's wrong, but I don't think he sees that as a positive outcome. I think he sees that as the only outcome and trying to get the best out of best you can, like settling. It's not the optimal outcome. Then there's these other people, like, you know, the transhumanists. They have this kind of almost religious view, like singularity university kind of view, or whatever. They would create a religion called singularity religion, which is that man will transcend himself essentially by uploading his consciousness into a machine. Yeah.
So the board, basically.
Simply, you can carve. You want to cross section the person's brain, and copy, and emulator and all that. And they don't see that as killing somebody. They don't understand the concept of consciousness. Actually, they totally don't devalue human consciousness, and just like they would devalue animal awareness, they devalue our self-awareness.
Right.
And they see that as immortality. So that's their outcome. Is they call that immortality, even though it's death.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's funny because we were talking about Darwinism too. I think a lot of people have, like, people that are pro technology, they have this attitude that, like, oh, we've gotten so intelligent that we don't abide by the rules of evolution anymore. That we've taken it over, and now we're ascending to a new level, and we're like but they don't see. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I mean that's the basic driving idea behind all this gene editing going on. Is like we can now control like the natural, like we can start like plants, we can just make them grow better by editing its genes. We don't know the long-term consequences of any of this altering, the natural genes that are there.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think that's the general principle behind a lot of like geneticists. Yeah.
They're pro rationality. Very, very. They think that we can use rationality to overcome any problems that we might have, and they completely. I think we talked a little bit about it on our last call that, like, we need to find this balance between rationality and instinct, or just like natural behavior, however you want to term that side of the spectrum.
Well, and emotion, and logic and emotion, right? We have our head and our heart, so to speak. But I mean, I want to comment on the gene editing. Yes, right. I mean, the whole thing, that the idea that you can control evolution the reason it's so arrogant is because you're talking about nature's natural process. And nature's natural process is so much more complex than anything that any human or group of humans could ever understand, could ever nail down. I mean, I've done some meteorology in my life, and the atmosphere is so complex. It's like a chaos theory. That's why you can't get a forecast beyond a week, because once the initial conditions start to the error starts to increase. It gets like you get a totally different outcome. So my point is, if you can't even understand meteorology beyond a week, okay, the way that you think really that you can actually grasp all the complexities and the evolution of any species, including your own, especially, or any species. To interfere with it, you're hitting it with a blunt instrument instead of nature's very refined and super duper complex, self-driven process. In other words, you're overriding a very complex self-driven process with a self-conscious, I'm gonna be basically very blunt, meaning very inaccurate imitation of that, and it's going to screw it up because it's not natural. It's not the natural process.
Yeah.
It's going to have the kind of consequences that would have. Nature's process needs to be left to nature.
Yeah. We think of ourselves as gods, and it's going to be our downfall.
That's right.
I actually have an interesting example. So, like, I've been looking a lot into like dog breeds recently, as of late, and something that I've noticed, like, almost across the board, is that in the last 120 years, right, basically after the end of World War I, that's when people started like standardizing dog breeds. Well, that's when German Shepherds became, it's this lineage and these genes and like all of this correlation. But then the moment we started standardizing these dog breeds is when almost all of their genetic problems showed up. So if you look at any pictures of modern day German Shepherds, they almost universally have terrible hip dysplasia, right? Like they have really bad hips. But if you look at pictures from before World War I of German Shepherds, across the board, none of them had hip dysplasia because there was this constant
there's variation.
There was this naturalized outbreeding between German Shepherds and other work dogs where the gene pools weren't getting so collapsed in on themselves. Mm-hmm. And it's just interesting because this issue with our abuse, I call it abuse, our abuse of genes, we see this a lot in plants with monocultures where insects, there's insect species that are now adapting to the monocultures and are wiping out 80% of a country's crops because there's only one type of, there's no genetic variation at all in agriculture anymore. And it's just a huge problem for for the modern technologists. It's a huge problem because they don't know how to, they basically can't keep up the pace to adapt to the genetic alterations we've already made that have all these unintended consequences.
It's too complex. Yeah. We can't hope to do that. Wes, I had a question about going back to communication a little bit, because I know you prefer to talk on the phone rather than email or something like that. That's right?
Well, yeah, because email is asynchronous.
Yeah. It's
And it's very distant and very over formalized, and 60% of all emails are misunderstood according to the research.
Yeah.
There's a reason for that. It's because you've not only eliminated the when you're on the phone, yeah, you have to traverse distance, but in other words, you at least have the sound, the human voice. But if you eliminate both the human voice and the physical presence, the visual and the physical, and that physical presence, the feeling between people, you eliminate all the human elements, and really all that's left in an email is something that the machine requires. It's just data. It's not communication, in my opinion. It's data.
Right.
Data transfer. It's it's exchange of data exchange, and it's not communication. So, I don't mind using it to pass documents back and forth, but it is not a substitute for conversation of any kind whatsoever, in my opinion.
Right. I totally agree. I wondered because, I think that I see this kind of trend that's been happening in communication technologies that, I don't know. I remember, like, you're obviously a bit older than I am, but I remember when I was probably in middle school when like texting first became a big thing, and everybody started using texting instead of talking on the phone. And then very quickly you saw how people started to become afraid of answering their phones. They're like, oh, why don't you just text me? They prefer, because I don't know, there's this like fear that they developed from an atrophy of their social skills have been atrophied, and so they prefer to like this textual communication. But it seems like there's kind of been this pushback where, I don't know, we see more like everybody uses like FaceTime and things like that now, and like Zoom calls. So it seems like people are trying to get that synchronous communication back in a way. I don't know, what do you think about how these like technologies have developed, like Zoom calls and FaceTime and things that seem to be more synchronous, but are, they require a lot more technology to upkeep them?
Yeah, so texting. First of all, texting I think is sometimes I will bring people onto the text to get them off the email, because at least it's a little more intimate and a little more synchronous than email, and it's a little less formal.
Right.
It's more, but it's still you still lose that. You've got the loss of the spatial dimension and also the loss of the temporal dimension when you do asynchronous communication. Mm-hmm. Now with Zoom, of course, I don't know. It's weird because somehow that screen, I don't know. It's synchronous, but it's totally sterile somehow.
Yeah.
Looking at a person, and that's why you've got a thing called Zoom fatigue. You've got a person. I mean, it should work, but somehow this simulated version of looking in someone's eyes, you're looking in their eyes, but they're not looking in. What are they looking at? I mean, if they're looking at the camera, they're not looking at you. So exactly. For them to look in your eyes, they have to look directly in the camera and not look at your eyes. And it's also because people are looking at themselves and they're looking at each other at the same time, so they're self-conscious, in the sense that they're looking at themselves and they can see their own, they're trying to. But yes, I totally agree with that. That you could be recorded, even if you're, and people don't use it to talk one-on-one as much. They use it for groups, so it's like, you're in these little Hollywood Squares boxes. But yeah, what I'm saying though about when you look at the camera, the camera is above where the other person's eyes are.
Yeah, exactly. So
you can't lock eyes with somebody unless the camera was positioned right where their eyes are. You're not really locked eyes with them because basically to really look directly at somebody in a computer, you have to look at the camera, which means you're not looking at the picture of their eyes.
Yeah. I would not be surprised if we saw within the next 5 years some kind of technology that has a camera that tracks, that's like behind the screen or something, that tracks where a person's eyes are. Like I would not be surprised if as Zoom becomes more popular, as people become more comfortable living indoors, as we have more pandemics, which I'm sure there will be. Yeah, it's only going to get worse.
I think it would be. I think it would be bad if it were a simulation for people who live locally who could meet each other in person. I actually found that it's distracting, all of this, like you say, performative stuff. And in a way, I prefer the phone stuff. I thought I would like the video call, but it's almost a distraction. I think there is some acting out, and somehow on the phone, it feels like it's outside. It's just more authentic, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, I will do Zoom calls, but I don't particularly like them, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
That's understandable.
Absolutely.
So West, I have a question. Early on in your piece, you talk about just like the general framework of the modern system, where you talk about like the kingpin oligarchs, like the technophiles, the mega corporations that are incorporated with the system. And then I'll quote you the specific question I want to ask. You say, you're talking about like the politics, right? And you say the declining institution of the state, a mostly non-functioning human institution that retains some legacy capabilities. So my two questions about this idea are, what is your, so let me phrase this properly. What do you think the future of politics looks like in the 21st century? Like not like what like the politics direction are going to go, but how will the political world interact? Because it used to be like, you know, you look at ancient Athens and the political world was very interconnected with the human world, right? Like it was almost one and the same. Like you wanted to go participate in the democracy, if you're a free person, you could go to the marketplace and you would be participating directly in your democracy. And like that's clearly gone, we've clearly gone further and further away from that. So where do you think it's going to go? Like what is going to be the future of how politics looks?
If the technocracy like continues,
if it continues if it continues to decline, that is.
Corporate techno-autocracy. Yeah. So I'll break that down. The corporations are already more powerful than the government. Mm-hmm. The corporations are non-human. The corporations are basically just like the electricity flowing downhill. So they're autocratic, right? Mm-hmm. They're autocratic also because those corporations, in a way, run by themselves. They're already, even the people who run them have very few options. So autocratic, autonomic, and then the techno part is that the humans will be increasingly taken out of the governance. So you will have AI governance, and people will support it because that way the human biases they will think are out of it. And what they don't understand is that they are literally all their human lives are being systematized for other people's benefit, and all of their higher functions are being fed into the machine and destroyed under that type. And China is the prototype right now. China is the beginning. It's a little different because in China the state and the corporations are one thing. It has all the symptoms of techno-autocracy. So total surveillance, total programming of your life by every aspect of your life and your thoughts by non-human entities. That's what I think.
That's a great. I'm just taking notes down. Well, that's not what I wanted to hear, but that's a great answer.
I know.
Not that I wanted to hear anything in particular, but that was just a really phenomenal answer.
Thank you.
That's just a good answer. Yeah, that was great.
It's definitely where we're going. It's so like I guess US we talk a lot of people kind of have, or the technocracy kind of promotes this idea that humans are the problem, that we have these biases that need to be taken over with in a rational systematic way. What are some ways that you see that we can kind of re-inspire hope in people's lives, or like reinvigorate people's confidence in themselves as human beings, and try to make them aware that these biases that we talk about are really not things that should be rationalized?
Look, I think a polity, body politic used to be a human institution. It was a human thing. It was run according to human priorities. Mm-hmm. So I think that all of the discord that, all the people being upset with, I think we have to turn them, they're blaming each other.
Yeah.
So basically they have to start understanding that what they're experiencing is being caused by the system, not by the people, not by each other. Mm-hmm. And they've turned on each other, and they're leaving the oligarchs and their systems, their autonomic systems, they're leaving those alone. And that's, they're losing their humanity to those things. So the first thing to do is to get people to focus on the system as the thing that's doing this to them and not their fellow citizens.
Right. Yeah.
Without that, because let's see, the problem is I don't think people care about it. I don't think they think they deserve any better somehow. And they just lash out and complain, but they don't. They've lost their agency. Their power process is gone. They've surrendered it. Yeah. Because they don't want the responsibility. And increasingly, I believe that people don't even want the responsibility of their own consciousness, that they see their consciousness as a burden. and they would like to be programmed in a way. So I don't think you can, most of the masked man is like the last man, and he's gone already. So I think you have to focus on the people who are still here, who still have presence. Mm-hmm. We have to focus on those people, and those people cannot do anything as individual atoms. They have to be restored trust in one another so that they can actually build things together that are human and that respect nature and that take responsibility for things instead of giving responsibility away. And that's the key right there, that, inspiring people won't do any good if they're all by themselves. Nobody can do anything all by himself. But if you get people who can do things together, they can do things, sort of bypass the system, if you will, and start to have our own human things again.
Yeah.
So I think the more we've been talking, I think I've started putting some pieces together about your beliefs would be the best way. Your philosophy, better way to put it. But it seems like compared to like Ted, right? Ted was really focused on like action in a way. He was very much focused on like, this is the world, this is how we need to change it. And it seems like one of the big, because you're trying to adapt his approach to to today, to the 21st century. And it seems like the big difference between you and Ted is that while Ted was focusing almost on the out there physical world, you're especially focused on like freeing the human mind first, it seems like. And
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I just want to make sure that was correct. I just want to make sure I was getting the.
Well, that's the difference, though, because he was writing in the 20th century, and the human mind was not under the kind of assault then that it is now.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying it wasn't under any assault, but it wasn't under assault by something that was supposed to be more intelligent or whatever. Mm-hmm. So, in a sense, I think the only mistake he made is that he gave too much credit to people who had already deteriorated past the point where. See, he thought he could inspire people, but they'd already deteriorated past that point. And I think he thought if he could just show them that this was happening, just make them aware, that they would jump to it. But I think he overestimated that. I really, most of them in a mass sense. And, and also I think that the out there physical was still relevant in the 20th century. But the 21st century, the attack is on our minds. Mm-hmm. And if we can't free our, in other words, that's what's imploded in the 21st century. So before you had a bunch of people who were, couch potatoes and stuff and really kind of, consumerist, but their actual minds were not under assault, like in the sense that, we want to take your thoughts and use them for data kind of thing.
Yeah.
We want to deplete your natural capabilities. No. So that's why it's different now, because the machines of the 20th century were built to replace human manual effort. Right. The machines of the 21st century, which are algorithms, are being built to replace the mental and cognitive capabilities of humans. Mm-hmm. And that is why the mind is being essentially enslaved, the mind. And so it's the mind that this is kind of like what Mumford said, the myth of the machine.
Right.
But it goes deeper than that, because if your mind is under attack, then you have to defend the human mind. Mm-hmm. If the physical world is under attack, then you have to defend nature. And you have to defend humanity's, you have to stop humanity from doing, what it's doing even to itself. You have to defend man from losing his power process to industrial machines, right?
Right.
But today it's the mind, and it's the mind that's under attack, and it's the mind that's being used as a resource for the system. And that was not the case in the 20th century. So I would say that the differences that you speak of are differences in the centuries that we find ourselves in.
Yeah.
And if we don't update, we have to update to the 21st century, because these ideas are valid, and we need those ideas to function in the 21st century. Mm-hmm. So the physical out there that I believe, have to deal with is basically reclaiming our physical spaces, also, so that we don't surrender them to techno-corporate governance. Yeah. So there is that element too. The out there is, I'm going to go. Let's restore our dealings with each other in person out there.
Yeah, to take all this communication offline. Actually,
Right.
yeah, to make sure that people aren't having their social skills atrophied, and that's just step one.
Yeah, online is a human zoo. It's a human confinement area. Believe me, when people are basically, it's attention capture is a method of assault on our minds. Attention capture by these technologies. And while people's attention is captured by these technologies, they are literally taking over every space that we ever had. Everything that we ever had, they are just reconfiguring everything. And people don't notice because their pleasure centers are being stimulated and they're being confined to virtual online zoos. Mm-hmm. And that is why that's what I mean by free the mind, because that if we don't do that, I mean, people will lose everything because they have given everything up just so that they can inhabit those spaces.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not even it's not even just a matter of like bringing these issues to light. It's like making it clear that things can still be done to overtake that it's not too late, at least for those that are enlightened enough. I guess I'll ask you, like, I think you briefly mentioned, do you think that there are a lot of that, like most of the population is too far gone at this point compared to like the 20th century, given how like technology is focused on the human mind now, that it seems almost futile to try to reach out to the masses, so to speak, that it's a matter
I mean, there's no point. I mean, the mass man was created out of mass society of the 20th century, right? Mm-hmm. So, the Industrial Revolution created mass man. It also created total war. Yeah. But the mass man himself was already, once he became a mass man and was removed from his natural small communities, he was already gone, because basically he had no more essentially responsibilities with other people in the sense of being in a community, and essentially he's already lost. He's already basically all the pleasures and everything, even from consumer society. Nietzsche talked about the last man and his qualities, and that is exactly what we see around us. Mm-hmm. So no, the mass man is not the last men are not going to do anything except be essentially jello. Yeah. So I believe that we need to focus on the people who are still here. I see people popping out of existence every day. It's like I've been seeing that for the last 20 years, people just popping out of our existence, and where they're going is in these virtual, human zoos. Mm-hmm. So I think my point is that people popping out of existence, I sense their loss. What I'm saying is that the people who are still here are the people who can still do things. Yeah. Because the people who popped out, they did it because they wanted to. Right, yeah.
They couldn't handle, they just couldn't handle the day-to-day anymore, like the day-to-day pressures, and they just had to be sublimated, basically.
They want to be run, they are reduced to, there was an author, the human engine, what is it called? Reengineering Humanity. They said that people are being basically downgraded to function at the level of simple machines. Mm-hmm. And so there are people who see their consciousness as a burden. They see it as oppressive to have to live in human communities. Yeah. And they would rather just be programmed and act like automatons. Mm-hmm. So those people, those people are, they have a different, I almost want to say different level of consciousness. They're not really, they don't want this. They want that. They want to, they want to be controlled and told what to do. They do not want, to be autonomous. They see that as oppressive and a burden. So it's the small percentage of people who see that as the only, that's the basic thing that needs to be protected. That those people who still are here and want that and see themselves as being limited by these machines that are trying to reduce them to simple machines themselves, to essentially automatons that just take instructions and follow, every bit of their lives they're told what to do. It's the other people who are not last men that need to be, coming together here.
Yeah.
To bypass these systems and figure out, what do we want to do as humans? What can the percentage of humans that don't want that? How do we rebuild human life for the people that still want it?
Yeah.
We're going to lose 80% of the people, if not more, no matter what. Mm-hmm. That's just the way it is. But I think that I think that the chance for some portion of humanity to survive this intact, let's say the system collapses with those 80% or whatever. But the other 20% can still survive if we make an effort to survive and to preserve ourselves, to conserve ourselves, which is why I call it conservation of man, because that's our responsibility to ourselves. Right. And to each other, is to try to preserve human life from this destruction. And nobody can do it as an atom.
So forgive me if I'm asking you to repeat yourself here, but like for that 20%, for those that identify themselves as part of that 20%, what would you say is the first step for them to help, prepare for the collapse,
to conserve? How can they take the first step to conservation of man?
They can't do anything by themselves.
Right.
The system is too powerful. They cannot. They have to band together with other like thinkers and strategize what to do.
Mm-hmm. In the real world, yeah.
That's the whole point. The system carved everybody into atoms. Mm-hmm. They destroyed our small communities, and that's how humans have survived for all of these thousands of years. Mm-hmm. So nobody can do anything by himself.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, you tell someone, how do you change politics? You think you're going to change it by yourself? Of course not. It's too big. Mm-hmm. It's too big, too complex. It needs strategy. It needs long-term thinking. It needs minds coming together to figure out what is the best course of action. What is the best way to survive this? What is the best way to preserve something for the future? Yeah. What is the best way to counter this system from outside it? Mm-hmm.
So we need to connect. We need to connect to each other and network, and start building a community in the real world. Start strategizing in the real world. You do mention towards the end of your paper when you're talking about what to do, that there is some sense, like once a strategy is created, that there is some use for technology at that point. Can you describe how you think how that works?
Well, basically, once you decide, it depends on what you decide to do. If you decide to just try to bypass the system and build the future, basically by example, show how humans can survive outside the system, and then people will come to you because they'll see, there is an alternative, right? Mm-hmm. So that's one way. But basically, you have to get individual people that are already, supporting our way of thinking. You have to go into the technology to get them.
Right.
You can't talk to them without getting into the technology. But then the idea is you bring the conversation. Once you go in there and get them, you bring them the conversation outside the technology, and you show them that there's, they're here. We've got, a community of people here, and we're trying to, figure out, basically how do we survive? How do we help each other to strengthen ourselves against the destructive, techniques of the system.
Right.
And strengthen ourselves. That's us using our power process. That's what we're doing, when we do that. Mm-hmm. Okay, so the other thing is that if we decide to engage, if we want to engage the system, like we want to, for example, we have a crisis happens, and we decide it's an opportunity. We go in there and we make a statement. And the statement, comes at a time when it can kind of be absorbed by the people who are disaffected, and that will bring people as well to bring our voice into, the people will see that there is some pushback to this trajectory, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Mm-hmm. And in terms of so tactically, we will all, and in other words, anything we want to say to the mass public or even to a specific segment of the public. We have to do it that way, but not as education, more as strategy, tactics.
Right.
This is that what you say has to directly impact the power of that system and empower people, and not just say, "Here's what you should do." Nobody should do anything by himself. Right. It's not possible.
Yeah.
So there are tactical uses of the technology. Mm-hmm. Tactical, that have direct impact on the balance of power,
right,
that are possible, but only if you have something to show for it, meaning if you really have a community of people. Because if you don't, then it's just floating in the air. It's not anything.
Right. It has to start in the real world.
Yes, it has to be grounded in the real world, and then you can take, you can utilize tactical use of the technology when you have to alter the balance of power. Yes, not to educate people. The people who are already feeling this pressure don't need to be educated. They need to be shown that there is an alternative, and they need to be introduced to each other. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And us, and to take back our responsibilities, our power process, and execute our power process for our own benefit and for the future.
Yeah, that's what it's all about.
So, West, we're coming up on the hour here, and I suppose my last question, maybe Griffin has another one, but my last question is a lot of our listeners are obviously already into the anti-tech world. And but a lot of people that are into the anti-tech world are isolated, right? They usually are, like, a lot of people that reach out to us are people that have, like, read Kaczynski, or they found something by Dr. Skrbina, and, like, a couple Google searches later, they end up, communicating with us. And you say that the first step, like, there's nothing an individual can do, but what they have to do is to find like-minded people and try to build something new. Like you said, either bypass the system or try to take people out of the system, right? So, yeah. So then my question is, for people like that are listening, I'm imagining I'm starting this listening, like, I agree with you 100%, but what is, like, how should I go about, and this is, if it was an audience question, how would I go about finding these other people in the real world? How should I go about doing that?
Well, they found you, right?
Yeah.
So yeah. So that's it. They've already found us.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. They nailed it. Yeah.
Nope, they've already found us. So they already know how to find us. Then we need to interact with them. So that's it.
Yeah. Yeah. As long as we, we aren't basing ourselves in the digital world.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. If they found us, we need to interact with them.
Yeah. So I think a lot about, some of the walls that I feel like we hit sometimes when we have these conversations. I always think of, I would say Kaczynski has kind of like an extremist attitude towards, like, the use of technology. It seems that the way he presents it, that engaging with it is always a bad idea, that it'll always, try to co-opt your efforts against it towards itself or something like that. But, it seems like if we have the right mentality about it, that it is possible to use it as a tool. So I wonder, does that mean that, like, technology can be neutral if used in the right way? Or I don't know, do you think that it's...
No, first of all, I don't think Ted actually said that. I mean, in the way, I don't think he said it in that absolute. I think he understood that you have to use the technology of the time because it's, because you have to. Mm-hmm. So I do think that he said that, actually. Okay. But I believe that, I think he was interested in technological minimalism, and no, I don't believe it's neutral, even if you have to use it. You do what you have to, because this is the environment we find ourselves in. Yeah. But I don't see it really as a tool. I see it as more, it's become an environment, actually. Yeah. And it's become an environment. And so sometimes you have to enter that environment to bring out the people who want to have something different. It's like an alternate environment. Mm. And you don't want to live in that environment, but you sometimes have to enter it to talk to people who want to come out of that environment and not ground themselves there.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
But to basically to think of actually, so really we're being used as the tools, actually. So that's why you have to be really careful when you go into that environment, that environment doesn't become the be all and end all. What's the problem is that you just land in that environment. Right. Yeah. So that's what I think. It's not neutral. It's an alternate environment to our own, to our real world environment. So no, it's not neutral at all. So I think that it's strictly tactical, meaning only when we have to, and then minimal as possible. Yeah. I would say minimal to only the degree that is absolutely required to do specific things that matter, not to educate people, not to basically contribute to the data stream and think that, no, it's the point is to build human communities, to build a human effort.
Yeah, and
to reinvigorate our real world environment. And that by doing that, we are fighting it because we're reinvigorating our real world environment and our personal power processes.
Yes, exactly. Like when you're talking about how people don't want they see their consciousness as a burden, and like we see that too. Like people actively don't want to think. They numb their brains with social media and stuff whenever they have free time, because they're like, it seems like they're afraid to be alone with their own minds, so to speak.
Yeah.
And I think some of it is because at least people our age especially, we've grown up in this kind of technological world. So a lot of people haven't even been given the chance to see the benefits of their own autonomic processes, to like their own autonomy, to they've only it's only been presented to them as negative, that the technological system has told them that if they sit alone with their minds, and they'll be anxious, they'll be overthinking all the time.
You'll get depression, you'll get you'll have all these mental disorders that come from thinking about your own world.
But it's technology that's created those things, in my opinion. That's right.
Yes. That's absolutely. All the fact that your generation has all this anxiety and depression is precisely because of being taken out of their human habitat and thrust into an artificial environment.
Yeah.
It's a mentally artificial environment.
Yeah.
Because it's not their physical environment. Mm-hmm. It's not their physical environment. It's a simulated environment, and it's the surrealism between the simulated, the surrealism of the simulating environment trying to overlay the real one that causes the dissonance, if you will. Mm-hmm. It's a kind of existential dissonance. And so if you make somebody put them along with their own thoughts, they're going to experience existential dissonance. And then they're going to freak out. They're going to be told, because they're already ungrounded, is my point. Mm-hmm. So that's why when they did this study, where they put people in a room, and they said, what would you prefer? Would you prefer an electric shock or 15 minutes alone with your own thoughts? Guess what the majority chose?
The electric shock.
Yeah. That's right.
Oh,
that's the level of severity of the last man having lost his grounding.
That's shocking, so to speak.
Yeah, isn't it? But then now you know the burden of consciousness to them, and so you can't expect that the mass of people know. I think you ever see the Poseidon Adventure? I don't know if you did. It's I'm a Gen X. I was a little girl in that era when that came out in the 1970s.
Yeah, I'm familiar with it. Yeah,
you did see it. Oh, you saw the old version. So there was a point where you had the mass of people walking a certain way, and this priest had 7 people with him, mm-hmm. and they were going the other way. Mm-hmm. And they were all walking further downhill, like deeper into the sinking ship.
Right.
And he's standing there with his 7 people, and he's got dozens of people passing by. He's telling them, "You're going the wrong way. You're going the wrong way." They're all going to their death, and the 7 people survive. Uh-huh. They're the only ones who survived, and that was all they could get with them. But they did survive.
Yeah.
The 7 people found their way up to the top and got out. Mm-hmm. So, and they didn't listen to the authorities that were telling them to do something different. They did it in time. They did it quickly. In other words, when they were climbing up the Christmas tree to get up, those people drowned immediately who stayed below. So there were dozens and dozens of people. So my point is that you can't save all those people. You have to save yourself. You have to band together with the people who already understand and want to save themselves and reground themselves and salvage something for us that might be enough to take some of the energy out of that machine if the people who already understand don't just go along because there's no alternative. Mm-hmm. Yeah. If all of us withdraw our energy from that machine and set up alternatives and demonstrate that alternatives exist, and what that looks like, it's those people I think that we should be talking to.
Yeah. And I think that's a great aspect of what we should be doing is providing that alternative and showing people that there are so many benefits to living autonomously and living outside of the system, and hopefully we can reinvigorate some of those minds, but at the very least we can save ourselves and spell out a better future for humanity, whether post-collapse or if we can save it. I guess we'll see.
Yeah, mean, the whole point is that I think we have to go after those people specifically.
Yeah.
I think there are people out there that we already know who they are. We need to go find them, and individual people matter, like individual human beings, as opposed to just, the system teaches people to think of each other as replaceable or interchangeable.
Right.
And we're not. The people already we know are out there. Those are the first people, and then the next people are the ones that we think might be out there, but we go look for them. We don't just say, okay, here come, we just, whatever. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
We because we're not trying to educate them. We're trying to include them in something that might be able to help us pull some energy out of that machine and reground a segment of us by banding together.
Right. Thank you, Wes, for talking with us and enlightening us about your paper. Hopefully, we'll be able, other people will be able to read it soon. Is there anything else that you wanted to say to people before we sign off here?
I think just to say that there is hope for humanity, but it's very important for the people who want that hope to grab it. That it is your responsibility as well as all of our responsibility, and we have to band together. And we have to reclaim the right to write our own future. I would call this human self-determination. Mm-hmm. We have to claim that right. So for the people out there, the we includes you. Mm-hmm. And we have to do it together or it won't happen. Yeah. Nobody can do anything on their own other than, try and minimize their technological involvement, but it really doesn't do any good if it's not with other people in terms of anything lasting that might matter for anyone other than oneself. Yeah, we're a social animal. We need to embrace that. Yeah. Yeah, and our power is, people banded together in groups, in small groups. And all through human history, nobody was ever, because even lions, they go in, and dogs go in packs, right? Lions go in groups. Everybody goes in groups because your power is not additive. If you go with other people, your power is more than the sum of the parts together. Right. Yeah. It's too big for anyone to just say, okay, I'm going to be all by myself and try and, no, it won't matter. Your ideas will go down with you because you don't have the others. Awesome. That was perfect final message. Thank you, Wes, for talking with us and joining us on the show. We hope to talk to you again soon. We hope to see you in the real world soon. And bring these things to light and start talking or walking the walk. Yeah.